Welcome back to My Life, His Story, brought to you by REBOOT Recovery. I'm your host, Brian Flannery. This week, we have part 2 of this amazing interview coming. So if you missed last week's episode 1, make sure you go back and watch that before moving forward. Like, follow, share, stay connected. That way you never miss an interview right here at My Life, His Story. Yeah, so Carin, as we ended last episode, here you were overcoming these suicidal ideations. And, of course, the rest of life became nothing but gumdrops and rainbows, right?
Yeah. No, I wish, Brian.
That's how it always turns out.
Yeah. The funny thing about this is I really thought after, kind of overcoming that and getting past some hardships, that, okay, got into my 30s and thought I'm raising up my boys and, we had our ups and downs, but I thought this is going okay, and then kind of middle school for my oldest hit. And we had some challenges. We had one event that I'm not going to share too much detail on this piece of it because it just leads into something else. But it was something that I felt nobody else could understand. Nobody else would relate to what we had experienced. And it caused me to pull away from friends, my church family. I actually, in 2011, walked away from my church. I love my church. They did nothing wrong. People were confused, but I just felt like what we were going through and what we had experienced, nobody could understand it. Nobody would be able to not look at us and judge our family, and I didn't want that. So here we were kind of in this place of not having that same support and family and stuff, and I was starting to work and created my own business and creating all these things around me that I wanted for support in what I was doing and raising up my kids. Nathan was 13 at this point, and Caden was 9. And this is when Newcastle in Connecticut, when the school shooting happened. And I looked at Nathan and Caden, and I thought, gosh, do they worry or think about these things like I do as a parent, and we all do, as parents? And so I asked Nathan. We had a very open relationship to be able to talk about things, and I just said, hey, Nathan, do you and your friends ever talk about school shootings? He's 13, 8th grade. And he said, yeah. I was like, man. It's like, buddy, I'm sorry. What does that conversation look like? What do you guys talk about? And he said, Mom, it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Wow.
Like, it had to be hard as a parent to hear that from your 13-year-old.
And I thought, I need to clarify on this a little bit. And so I said, Nathan, do you mean like when in the world it will happen? And he goes, no. He goes, when it's going to happen here.
Wow. I don't know if I've ever really been speechless in my life, but I have 2 kids that are right around 13, and I can't fathom my kid saying, it's not if, it's when.
Yeah. And here. It's not when am I going to hear about it on the news. It's when is it going to happen in my school.
Yeah, and almost as a terrible foreshadowing, as a mom, hearing your child say that is unbelievable, but then what you didn't expect, and, going back to what you said earlier, you always thought that it would be you that would die at a tragically early age.
Yeah.
But then your biggest fear as a mom came true.
Yeah. Now, my kids are still here. I just want to make sure nobody.
Sure.
But that was February of 2014. And October, 9 months, you guys, to the day, I get the call that there's a school shooter. And we live in Marysville, Washington, and we have 2 high schools, and our high schools are very intertwined. All the buses go to all the community and they pick up all the kids. They drop off at one high school and then they go to the next, and all the kids know each other, and it's very close. Nathan was at the other high school, and I get a phone call, and I was in a meeting and I ignored the phone call, and he didn't actually even have a cell phone, so I wasn't sure what this number was, but he called and he said, "Mom, there's a school shooting and it's this person," and we knew this person. This was a kid that my son played sports against, literally head to head in 2 different sports. And he had friends that were at the lunchroom table that day. And that was, he called it, he said, it's not a matter of when, or if, it's when. And for some reason, I kind of knew he was right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think in situations like this, oftentimes, right, like the media and everything else afterwards, they portray all these crazy things. And honestly, I think my mentality has always been, I want to spend time where it matters, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have this horrific experience, legitimately a parent's worst nightmare. And I want to ask you, can you walk us through the healing journey that this started? Because I know it wasn't right away, and I know, again, it wasn't like abracadabra, poof, gumdrops and rainbows. But can you help us understand what it looked like to heal from this?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. The first couple things, once I kind of could breathe, that moment of just like all the air leaving, I went, okay, Lord, I just watched, first of all, our community. Our community was amazing. We had a place called the Living Room Coffee House, and they opened up. They had, they were kind of a church coffee house. They literally opened up and they took in all the kids and took care of people. I really started noticing different people in our community, not only the first layer of all of us who, either people who are at the school, actual Marysville Pilchuck, the other kids at the other schools. Then you had, siblings and kind of the ripple effects outwards. But then you started seeing like the baristas who saw moms and dads coming through their stand every day just crying. You saw the people who worked at the cell phone places with parents in there, buying cell phones through the roof because they wanted to be in communication with their kids every moment that they could. And God just kept putting on my heart like these pieces, and watching it and just giving me words of how to have conversations with my kids. And I wouldn't ask my kids necessarily how they were doing. We had check-ins. We did this. I feel like I'm supposed to tell this. I will. We had these check-ins. Instead of saying, how are you doing? It was, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, just give me a number. Just give me a number how you're doing, and it was like, well, I'm okay.
That's
not okay,
That's, so it's so funny how parents do that. Like, man, I haven't thought about this in probably 25 years, but my dad, he was a big fan of Home Improvement, the Tool Time show with Tim Allen.
Yeah.
And there was an episode where instead of saying I love you, they would say, how about them lions? Right? Yeah. That's what Tim Allen would always say. And that just became mine and my dad's thing. Like so randomly he would just, like, even when I was deployed, he would send me a letter that literally just said, how about them lions?
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so it's always awesome to me when parents and kids have this special way of communicating where even though outside nobody else has any idea what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Like for us, we have one with my son. My oldest son is a bull in a china shop. He just is. He's a big kid and he doesn't think, he just moves and he breaks stuff. And so our whole family, we just do this, right? We'll just look at him and do that. And then he's like, oh, I need to calm down, But Anyway, so that's special. Just being able to communicate with your kid, even if it's just a number, because then there's also no fear. Like nobody else knows what that number means but you and them. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, most of us, when we hear or read about these school shootings that are increasing and happening more and more, I think one of the things that we always fail to realize is the healing that the whole community needs.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
And even as you were just talking about the baristas and the phone salespeople and all these people that were affected second, third, fourth hand of this, like at the end of the day, it's an event, like it's almost like 9/11, right? 9/11 of 2001 was one of the worst days in American history for Americans, right? We were attacked, we were punched in the face by an enemy. Many people in my generation, that's what led us to the military, right?
Yeah.
That's what ignited the fire under us that America is worth fighting for. But, and as much as we talk about 9/11, 2001, I always think back to 9/12, 2001.
Yeah.
That was the first time I'd ever seen some of my neighbors come outside and shake hands. That was the
Right.
first time my whole street was covered in American flags.
Yep.
That was the first time that I had ever seen our nation really rally and unify against something. It didn't matter if you were left or right, rich or poor, middle class, upper class. None of that mattered. Together we were Americans. And it sounds like from what you're describing, that's really the same decision that your community made against and after this school shooting.
Yes, absolutely. It was amazing to have that, experience. And we still, that was 2014, and we still, every time somebody comes, we've got our regional operations center for REBOOT is here in Marysville. And I love that, when we looked around the United States and, they put a dot in a map, they picked Marysville, Washington, and
Yeah.
every person says this is so needed. And the thing that I love about this community is the fact that we came together, to really help each other through this.
Yeah. And I think that, kind of to Brian's point earlier, I think that we really miss those opportunities of focusing on those moments when tragedy happens in these communities and in our country. Focus on the rallying together and the support instead of the tragedy that happened. Yes, we know that happened, but instead of putting so much, we see the pictures and we see all the things of the perpetrators or whatever it may be. Focus on the love and the uniting of the communities, your community that's coming together and supporting one another and building one another up, even to this day. I think that's just powerful, and I love that you shared that. I think we miss that a lot, and thank you for bringing that forward even more and reminding me of how important that is.
May I share one more piece? I've got another piece of our story.
Yeah.
That's kind of, it really is. At the time, I didn't understand. I thought we'd, again, experience the worst. What gets worse, than a school shooting? But the next part of our journey really laid foundation to see what God's doing in my life and to realize how he's pulled all these pieces together. So is it okay if I share that here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is your time.
Oh, well, it's funny, when these traumas come up, it's not funny, but when these traumas come up, you think, okay, this is it. This is, here's again, what'd you say, Brian? The gumdrops and rainbows?
Yeah, gumdrops and
right?
rainbow. That's right. Life is gumdrops and rainbows.
Yeah, so we thought, okay, we experienced a school shooting. The next year, it was like, okay, and that was my oldest son's first year of high school. My youngest was in 5th grade at the time, and it was like, okay, now we can breathe. Everything's good. We're going to move on to this next part. And so sophomore year, it was exciting. He actually, he had switched to Pilchuck. He wanted something that people who know my son understand well. He's got kind of this, my oldest, he's got this warrior spirit where he wants to save the day. And so he actually transferred to Marysville Pilchuck because he wanted to make sure if that ever happened again, he could stop it. So we're going through sophomore year, and he's going, and something happened, altercation started to happen, and he tried to stop it. I ended up having something happen. I got to back up a second to show you how God worked through this. That morning at 8 o'clock, I was sitting on my couch and I was drinking my coffee, and the way I kind of sometimes have time with God is I just talk out loud to him. I sit there and imagine, that I can feel like God's right there with me on my couch, and I'm drinking coffee and talking to him. And I just had this thing of going, God, with everything that we've been through and my belief of, tragic things happen to kids, all this, I don't trust you, God. And that was such a weird place to be in, to say, I don't trust you. And I said, I don't trust you that bad things won't happen to my kids. And I was saying this out loud to him. I said, because that's not the promise. You didn't promise that bad things won't happen in life. And I've got, evidence behind me, Lord, of all the times that bad things have happened. The promise, I know you said the promise is that you'll hold me, but I don't I thank you that you'll hold me, but that's not what I want. I want bad things not to happen.
Sure.
That was at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 1 o'clock, I get a phone call that my son is being taken by ambulance from the high school to the emergency room because his jaw has been broken in 2 places at school because he was trying to stop a fight, got into it, and 2 places in his jaw.
Wow.
The thing that God did with this was there's so many more pieces. We'd need probably 3 more podcasts to share how God works.
The good news is I know the host, so we can always have you back.
Well, I'll try to keep it condensed, but there's a lot more. And so my son's jaw was broken, 6 weeks of keeping him out of school and going through surgeries, jaw wired shut. He couldn't talk for the first week. That's another story there. Had to feed him. We even blended pizza so he could try food, because he couldn't eat or anything. Anyways, we after that, it was a matter of kind of watching over his shoulder. Who is he going to have to fight after that? Who is he going to have to, what battle was he going to have to face in high school? So he went the rest of his sophomore year, got into junior year. By the end of junior year, he had 0.65 of a credit. Not 6.5, 0.65 of a credit. And I'm just going, why doesn't he quit? I give up. He wasn't working. He wasn't doing anything. He literally was going to school every day looking over his shoulder. And he came to me and he said, Mom, I'm not going to graduate. And he's like, I found this thing called the Washington Youth Academy, and it's the school that I go for credit retrieval. And I was like, no, Nathan, you don't need that. That's boot camp for bad kids. No. And he's like, no, Mom, this is what I feel like this is what I need to do. And I fought it. No way, you're not going there. He did. He ended up going there. It was 5.5 months where he went and lived at the school, and we only saw him 3 times during this.
Wow.
He came out, all those things that had been stolen from our trauma, all those pieces, from the shooting to his jaw being broken to just missing out on high school the way that it should have been. He got to reclaim that and, kind of work through things differently. Flash forward, he came back, graduated the end of his high school. And when the shooting happened, sports were gone for him, right? He quit all sports, and he was a football star. He, when the jaw got broken, his dream of being in the military, we thought was gone. They're not going to take him. He wanted to go in the Navy and do all this. And when you got a metal plate here on your chin and, you've had your jaw broken, they're not going to take him. Well, he came out and he went to a National Guard, and I was like, you want to go National Guard? What are you talking about? And he goes, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I was like, awesome, much respect for that, but that's never been what you wanted. And he said, no, that's what I want to do. I know I'm skipping through fast, but I just got
No,
to show
you're
you
good.
how God works in this.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so good. So we go to MEPS, right? And for anybody who doesn't know, MEPS is, where you go to sign up, sign on the dotted line and, raise your right hand and all that good stuff. And we go there for National Guard and they do all the medical stuff because they're okay with his jaw being broken. They didn't even really look at that. Navy wouldn't have looked twice at him. He wouldn't have been able to
Sure.
go. So we go, he gets cleared medically, all these pieces, he goes to get his job that they, for him to sign up for. And they said, oh, you can't have the job you want. And he went, okay, well, here's my second choice. They said, no. He came out, and I mean, we're all, it's a big fanfare day
Sure.
and everything. 18-year-old Nathan is sitting there and he goes, or 17 at the time. He's like, Mom, I can't get the job I want. I'm not called to do these things that they want me to do. And I said, buddy, you got to make that choice then. And he said, oh, I want to walk. Okay. So we left. A week later, he returned back to MEPS because he had gone to the Navy recruiter. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll take you. They didn't ask anything about his jaw, nothing. We get back to MEPS. This is how good God is. Because he had already been cleared for the National Guard, they never looked at his medical record. They're like, okay, what job did you want? He said, I want this job. Guess what? He swore in that day.
That's awesome.
And that's how God worked that out.
Wow.
Well,
Now, again, there's so much more to the story, but that
Sure.
is for another
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely. Well, I do appreciate the Cliff Note versions. For anyone that's listening, Cliff Notes was a abbreviated version of stories that you could use to read summaries to write papers on before the internet. Yeah, before the Google was a big thing. But Carin, I'm so thankful. Thank you so much for joining us today and last week. And thank you so much for just being willing to talk about your life and how your life became his story. I'm so thankful that you made the decision to personally heal and that your family followed suit in that decision as well. And I would just say to anybody that's listening, if there's something you're going through or something you've been through and you've always just stuffed it or ran from it or hid from it, and check out rebootrecovery.com because you can start your healing journey today as well. So Carin, thank you again so much. Heather, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you next week.